let's talk about materials. The first thing that I would consider an essential is shellac flakes, real shellac. You cannot do French polishing, you shouldn't do French polishing, I should say, with a prepared commercial product. The great thing about this, about French polishing, is you're creating your own polish. So we use shellac flakes, and the best ones that you can get. Unlike when I first started polishing, there's actually a pretty good handful of suppliers now. Let's look at what shellac flakes look like. This is platina, it's called, the color. You will find that the colors that suppliers call their shellac don't necessarily relate to the actual color, but platina usually, I guess it comes from platinum, and it's a very light colored, very blonde shellac. That in comparison to a blonde shellac, which is a little bit darker than the platina, but again it's got sort of a blondish color. Here's a ruby. There's some red in this. De-waxed ruby. We're going to talk about waxed versus de-waxed shellac in a minute. Here's a de-waxed garnet. It's a darker, one of the darker shellacs. I also use, and we'll talk about using, as I say, de-waxed versus waxed shellac. Shellac in its natural state usually has somewhere between 5 and 6% wax content. The de-waxed shellac, which is a chemical process to remove most of the wax, usually end up with 1% or less wax content at the end. Both of these, this is TN, it's called. I'm not even sure what TN means. But anyway, this is a really neat shellac. It has its wax content still in there. Here's a handmade lemon. Now, why this is called lemon when it's fairly dark, I don't know, but this is a lemon. And in fact, here is the shellac that lemon, handmade lemon made. You'll see sometimes shellac suppliers will list handmade versus machine made. The handmade is a very old traditional methodology. Machines obviously are more, it's a modern methodology. I'm not going to say which is better or worse. They are different, and you will see that the texture of the shellac is actually a little bit, it feels different, it mixes a little different. Again, not better or worse, it's just different. Then sometimes you get into things like button lac. I really like button lac. And button lac comes in round, as the name implies, round buttons. Here's Pumice button lac. There's many more. As my wife will tell me, I have too much shellac. I have many colors and varieties. Let's look at what they look like when they've been mixed. As I said, here was the de-waxed lemon, which is certainly not lemony. And excuse me, this was not de-waxed lemon. This was the handmade lemon. Here's blonde. This is de-waxed. You can see it's pretty light, kind of got a golden color. This is that TN. It has a wax content. It's sort of a caramel color. Let's see, what do we got here? This is an orange. This is the machine-made orange. I guess it's got a little bit more orange in the color than the TN, but hard to tell the difference just from the liquid in the jar. Here we have our de-waxed lemon. So here, comparing to a waxed lemon, the color's not too different, but one is a much clearer with no wax in it than this. We're going to talk, by the way, about removing wax. And over here, I have, here's more of the handmade lemon. There's definitely a significant wax content. You can even see in the jar. Again, how you call this lemon, I don't know. It's quite a dark caramel color. It's nice stuff. So that is what you're going to get when you purchase your shellac. Other materials. We talked about alcohol, denatured alcohol. Now, there are polishers who will swear to you that you must use certain special kinds of denatured alcohol that are usually a little bit more expensive. I have not found that to be true. I have experimented with some of those products. They're perfectly nice, but I haven't found any difference in terms of my methodologies anyway. Some people swear that they do. And so I wouldn't necessarily push you away from that, but understand that people have been using denatured alcohol in French polishing for a very long time. I usually get stuff at the hardware store. This is the green version of Clean Strip. Again, it's just a hardware store denatured alcohol. We also use as one of our in our process pumice, and I'll show you pumice, which is a fine powder. It's been powdered. It's an abrasive. Pumice is very traditional in French polishing, so we'll show you how to use pumice. What do you apply the materials with? Depending on the source that I read from the 19th century, it was called a fad, sometimes it was called pad, sometimes it was called a rubber. Here's what I believe to be true. The fad is a piece of either cheesecloth, cotton waste, which is what this is, or could be cotton t-shirt material, and you rubbed the polish into your wood with the fad. A rubber is a fad surrounded by a cover. The cover can be, in some references that use linen, muslin, t-shirt cotton, this is actually linen, soft cotton, good t-shirt material. You surrounded the fad with the cotton. Every polisher seemed to have his favorite shape that they swore you had to create the pad or the rubber, in that shape in order to make it work. I've experimented. I'm not sure that there's any miracle shape, but I know people who do. One of the things that you should definitely use, whatever material that you're going to use in terms of t-shirt or linen or whatever, I even read references where they use silk, is you should wash the material and machine dry it. So that's going to remove imperfections, and you'll also find that old cotton cleaned works the best. So I will literally use the same materials probably throughout this entire guitar. I've already used these on the last guitar that I did and cleaned them afterwards and then used them again. Eugene Clark, in his demonstrations, literally had small little tattered bits of cloth that he used that had been that were like 20 years old. And he claimed, and I believe, that the older, well-worn fads and pads and rubbers are better. than using a brand new piece of material all the time. So what I do is I put them in a jar. I put a drop or two of alcohol that keeps them moist. I close the jar, and I've got my fads. There's another category of material that I should briefly mention that we use in the process. There's a lot of other things, but one is important, and that's oil. I use two kinds of oil. Olive oil, and that's strictly used for lubrication. The pad will tend to stick on the surface of the wood as you move it, and so a drop of olive oil on your pad or your fad is very effective. You'll see how we do that. The other is walnut oil, and through history, polishers used some sort of an agent to help the finish dry and harden better. And in the old days, in the 19th century, boiled linseed oil was often used. I learned through Eugene Clark to use walnut oil. And the reason is that boiled linseed oil tends to break down over years and create sort of a sticky finish. That was his belief. And other finishers have tended to go away from linseed oil. Walnut oil, it's a great hardening agent. If you're going to use it, use 100% walnut oil, no additives. When I began to French polish, that was a little hard to find. There wasn't that much walnut oil that you got from the store that didn't have something else thrown into it. Today, maybe it's our interest in pure foods. You can go into the store usually and find walnut oil that's 100% pure. You can certainly get it through Amazon if you can't find it through your store. There's even some made specifically for woodworkers. I guess bowl turners like walnut oil. So we're going to show you how to use the walnut oil. It's very simple. After I mix up the shellac, I basically put 2 or 3 tablespoons into my jar. You don't have to be very anal about how much walnut oil you use. As Eugene Clark said, the shellac knows how much to use, and it'll throw off the rest, which I always found an interesting statement, but that was his belief. So in the process, you'll see us using both those two oils.